Does it look like in heaven? Is it peaceful? Is it free like they say? Does the sun shine bright forever? Have your fears and your pain gone away? 'Cause here on earth it feels like everything good is missing since you left. And here on earth everything's different. There's an emptiness. Oh, I hope you're dancing in the sky. I hope you're singing in the angels' choir. And I hope the angels know what they have. I'll bet it's so nice up in heaven since you arrived. So tell me, what do you do up in heaven? All your days filled with love and light. Is there music? Is there art and invention? Tell me, are you happy? Are you more alive? 'Cause here on earth it feels like everything good is missing since you left. And here on earth everything's different. There's an emptiness. Oh, I hope you're dancing in the sky. And I hope you're singing in the angels' choir. And I hope the angels know what they have. I'll bet it's so nice up in heaven since you arrived. I hope you're dancing in the sky. And I hope you're singing in the angels' choir. And I hope the angels know what they have. I'll bet it's so nice up in heaven since you arrived. Since you arrived.
Oh Lord, my God, when I Nadine Dudley, age 89, of Dallas, Georgia, passed away on Sunday, February 7th, 2021, at Wellstar Tranquility at Cobb Hospital, Austell, Georgia. Mrs. Dudley was born March 31st, 1931, in Atlanta, Georgia, to Mr. William Gurley, Mrs. Roselle Bowman Gurley. She was married to Mr. Hugh Harold Dudley, Sr., for many years prior to his passing in 2002. She was a loving mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. Prior to retiring, she worked in housekeeping at Paul Memorial Hospital. She was preceded in death by her loving husband, Mr. Hugh Harold Dudley, Sr., her parents, Mr. and Mrs. William Roselle Bowman, her sisters, Mrs. Dorothy Carter and Mrs. Louise Attaway, and her brother, Mr. Bill Gurley. Mrs. Dudley is survived by her daughter, Gloria Barnes, and her husband, Jim, her daughter, Sharon Hatcher, her son, Hugh Dudley, his wife, Angie, her son, Ricky Dudley, her son, Edward Dudley, her son, Stephen Dudley, her son, John Dudley, and his wife, Myra. Any grandchildren and great-grandchildren also survive. Juanita Dudley was a friend of mine. And I got to know her many years ago, 50 plus, at church. That's where I meet most people I know, church. And some of you younger folks probably won't know what this means, but there was such a time when hospitality was practiced. Some of you might want to dig up an old dictionary and see what that word means. Back then, it was not uncommon. Matter of fact, it was typical after services on the weekend, 2 or 3 families would get together and visit with each other till midnight or beyond. And most of us it was a pretty good gang of us. There was 10 of us, 7 of the Dudleys, so pretty good bet you're gonna have one your age to play with. And at that time, I believe the Dudleys lived right out the road here, about a mile, on the left, going out of town. And I remember a few particular situations on some of those nights that I'll get to in a minute. But first of all, I want to describe Juanita, at least how she struck me. And to do that, I want to describe Harold. Now, you're gonna need to hang with me just a few minutes, and it'll all clear up in a minute. Harold, now I think all of you will confirm me on this, was real quiet and laid back. He was not easily provoked, easily excited. He was not excitable. He was a grave, somber, serious-minded person. Is that right? Is that fair? Well, Juanita was none of those things. She was a live wire, absolutely. And I think she passed on something to the boys, at least. I can't speak for the girls. But the most innocuous word I can think to describe the boys, that the ones I interacted with, played with, was, this is a gentle term, a gentle word, mischievous. And I reckon where they got that. Just look deep into Juanita's eyes and you might just figure that one out. A pleasure to be around, pleasure to be with. But he probably don't remember this, and it's gonna surprise him, but my earliest memory of the Dudley family had to do with Hugh. Now, Harold was a brick mason, and my daddy thought he was the best brick mason ever was. At home, he would brag on him. He would say, look at how straight that seam is. And he bricked our church. And he would go on and on about how good a brick mason Harold was. And they had a lot of good times together. But he was doing a job for us, and I probably was under 10. I wasn't very old. And Hugh was the mortar mixer. Ain't that right? You mixed the mortar. You mixed the mortar, right? And my earliest memory, and this is odd, it's a strange thing, the things you remember about people. But Hugh was mixing the mud, and he went and get a bag of mortar, Now, I think those bags weigh about 80 pounds now, but I think back then they weighed about 200. They were bigger, I'm pretty sure. And Hugh came up to that mixing pan and pressed that mortar over his head and slammed it down in the pan. And I was, to say I was impressed is an understatement. I thought, what a man. I said, nobody wants to mess with that man. That's the strongest man I've ever seen in my life. And that's my earliest memory, and that's odd what you remember. It's kind of like wrestling one of them 24/5 tire with a wheel on it, Steve. And that was my first and earliest memory of the Dudley family, was Hugh. And he has no idea. He probably, he was older than us. He don't even know me, probably. He probably don't even remember me. But as I said, the Dudleys live right after the road here. And not only would we visit on Saturdays and Sunday nights on the weekend, but in the afternoons, I would go home with some of them. And I would go home with Edward and Steve. They were close to my age. And there's an old barn on that place. You remember that old barn? And my memory's a little fuzzy right here, but I think that's where you snuck off to smoke. And to this day, I wonder how it is that we didn't burn that barn down or fall through the loft. And for all I know, that y'all did eventually. But just like Juanita didn't know what we was up to. I'm sure she did. When we get to a certain age, about 12 or 13, up to that, we think our parents know everything. And there's some point in our life, about 12 or 13, one day they know everything, and the next day they don't know anything. They're the biggest ignoramuses there ever was. Up to 12 or 13, they know it all. And then the next day they know nothing. But they always know more than we think they do. They knew what we was up to. And I'll give a couple more examples of the mischievous nature of some of those boys without telling too much. On another night, we were visiting with them I think it was Saturday night after singing. And one of them got the bright idea to start throwing eggs at tractor and trailers going down the road. And he went into the kitchen, got out all he could tote, and one by one the truck come by, he'd throw it at. And when he was out of ammunition, he'd go back in and reload. And he did that several times. And I'm pretty sure the next morning Juanita didn't find any eggs in that refrigerator, and I don't know what y'all did for breakfast. It served you right to do without. And I guess Ricky shouldn't, he probably wouldn't want me to tell who that was. That did that. Another occasion, we were over there on another occasion on a Saturday night or Sunday night, and I had a friend of mine with me. And you know how boys are, 12, 13, they're tough, they're all tough. And this friend of mine, they weren't as familiar with him as they was me, and they got to wanting to fight, see who was the toughest. And this went on for about an hour. They was at each other, I can whip you. No, I can whip you. And so finally, let's just see. That fight lasted about 5 seconds. They beat it on each other for about 5 seconds, and that's all it took. Realized both of them, they weren't near as tough as they thought they was. And Ricky probably wouldn't want me to tell who that was either. But these are precious memories. I wouldn't trade the world. People growing up now I don't think know how to live like we did. As we get closer and closer together, we grow further and further apart, don't we? Some of you, I bet you don't even know who your next door neighbor is. I can speak for myself on that at least. It's just a sad state of affairs, and then it's COVID that hadn't helped, had it? But these are precious memories I have had of the Dudley family. And we grow up, and families disperse. We scatter, and we lose contact with each other. I don't know why that is, but on occasions like this, almost inevitably, I'll have a conversation with somebody, and they'll say, we've got to do something about this. We've got to start visiting one another and reestablish contact. But it seems like it never happens. As far as Juanita is concerned, we all grew up. We went our separate ways, and I lost contact with them until just a few years ago. Steve's my tire man, so I kept up a little bit with y'all through him. And I realized his mama had come back to Dallas and lived in the nursing home. So I started visiting her again. And the hardest part about going to see Juanita was leaving. She wouldn't let you. You get ready to leave, and well, you don't have to go anywhere. You can stay and talk a little. I mean, she talked continuously. And I tried to be a good listener because, she needed somebody to unload on every now and then. And I tried to be that somebody. And so I would stay another 10 minutes, and I'd say, I really do have to go. No, sit down. This would go on for about an hour. And finally, I would have to just, run for the door because I really did have to go eventually. And but she would tell me stories. She did nearly 95% of talking. And she would tell me stories about how her and Harold and Daddy and Mama used to go places together. They go to revivals together. They go visiting together. And there's one particular story she told me every time I went, and sometimes twice or three times. Right there toward the end, she would tell me this story, and then she'd tell me again. They went out to a revival or a visitation or something, and they stopped by a restaurant, and they sent Daddy in for the hot dogs, and Juanita specified she wanted onions on her hot dog, but Daddy came back without onions on her hot dog, and she stayed after him to go back in there, and Daddy was real shy, and he just refused to do it. He just wouldn't go back in there and ask that waitress to put onions on her hot dog, and she would tell me that story, and then she would cackle. He said, your daddy, he just would not go back in there and do that. And then a few minutes later, she'd tell me again. But she got a good laugh out of it. And it's amazing the kind of things you remember, that the memories that you cherish, seemingly nothing at the time, but they stick with you, and they're memories because they reveal something about the disposition and personality of people, and that's what you remember. And it helps you remember people and what it was about them that you loved. And there was one more thing about visiting her in her later years. There was one thing I could never do. I never was successful in doing this. When I would come in, I never did catch her without her lipstick. She was always dressed as if she was going somewhere. And so she has. And so she has. And I can vouch for the fact that she was ready. Because on those visits, she would talk to me about her faith. And she would talk about heaven, matter-of-factly, as if you would talk about anything. It was something real. I believe that's what Jesus meant when he talked about coming to him as a little child. When a little child comes to you, when one of your children come to you, they don't come to you with doubts. They are certain, at least up to a certain age, that when you speak, you know what you're talking about. So when she spoke about heaven, it was a real place, a real destination. And she cherished that. And that Harold would be waiting on her. She didn't have any doubts about that. She cherished it. I can tell you that she loved her husband and her family, because that's mainly what she talked about and old friends. Now, I want to just briefly, just for the next few minutes, as I just said, she was always dressed as if she was going somewhere, and now she has. I want to talk to you about that. Funerals are something that we all dread, the occasion of a funeral. But Solomon wrote one time that it's better to go to a house of mourning than to a house of feasting. Because he says that's the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart. What he means by that is this: when there's a death in the family, the death of a friend, let me pause right here and say this. I think this is the way it ought to be. I think funerals ought to be a somber occasion because of what Solomon said. It's better to go to a house of mourning because the living will lay it to his heart. We are compelled to think about things that matter, real issues of life and death. We are compelled even to face our own mortality. And that's the reason that we gather together on occasions such as this, not to celebrate, but to think about the real things that really matter, issues of life and death. One of the oldest books in the Bible, one of the oldest characters in the Bible, Job. And all of you probably know the story of Job. He lost everything. He lost his family, he lost his wealth, he lost his health, and he lost the support of his wife. And in the middle of all that suffering, he asked this question that plagues mankind forever. He said, if a man die, shall he live again? And then he went on to say, all the days of my appointed time will I wait till my change come. And what do you mean by that? He meant, and just to put it in Paulding County English, this is how Steve Dudley would say it. Something's got to change. I don't know how many times I heard Steve say that when he was wrestling one of my tires. Something's got to change. Things ain't going just right. And things wasn't going right for Job. And he said, this question that plagues all of humanity, if a man die, shall he live again? All the days of my appointed time, all my life, I'm going to wait till my change comes. Because he realized deep down in his gut, and we all realize this is not how it ought to be. It ought not be this way. Death is abnormal. It's not normal. And we know that. Because we know that if God is love, that he is perfect, that he is holy, that death has to be a temporary intrusion. It's not normal. And the fact that we are on a perpetual crusade or pursuit of the fountain of youth, or a miracle pill, a miracle drug, a miracle diet, to maybe add one day, another week, another month, another year to our lives, betrays the fact that we all think that way. Some of us will even spend our last dime to buy another day. But all these pursuits that we engage in as humanity, the race of humans, to buy a few more days of physical life, are all ultimately doomed to failure. We sometimes succeed, and we might add a few weeks, a few years even. I think the Seventh-day Adventists, they follow a real strict diet, a real strict code of conduct. And I think their average lifespan is 6 or 7 years, longer than the average. But what is that beside eternity? That's about the best we can do. And the reason that all of these attempts are doomed to failure is because the fundamental cause of death is not physical. It's spiritual. The fundamental cause is not physical, but spiritual. It's the spiritual root of death that has to be dealt with. And that's what Jesus Christ came to do, deal with the fundamental cause. He didn't come to perpetuate our lifespan a few years. He came to give us eternal life. To accomplish that, he had to deal with the root cause. And we all know what that is. It entered into the human family in the garden. The day that you eat of this fruit, God told Adam, you will surely die. The fundamental root cause of death is a spiritual root, and it's sin. So that's why Jesus had to come. It was not possible for any human being to deal with the root cause. And so because we're, as Paul said, sin entered into the world and death by sin. So all die because all have sinned. So when Jesus came, he dealt with that issue. The Son of God, very God of very God, entered the human family, took on the nature of a man, lived as a man, a sinless life. So he had the credibility. He didn't have any sin to pay for with the penalty of death, his own. Being a sinless human, he was able, because of his authority as very God and his power, to take on the sin of the world. He took on our condemnation, which was death, the sentence of death. The judge himself took the place of the condemned and took upon himself. As Isaiah 53 says, God has laid on him the iniquity of us all. And so he bore our shame, our iniquity, our guilt on the cross. And he says that anybody believes in him and believes that he has indeed done that, he has taken on our guilt, suffered the penalty for it, and defeated death, came out of that tomb on the third day. He says, truly, truly, I say to you, he that believes in me, though you are dead, yet shall he live. In another place he told his apostles, he says, he that lives and believes in me shall never die. And then after he made that declaration, he asked this question to his own apostles. He says, do you believe this? And that's the key. That's all he asks. Do you believe this? He that lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? And if we can say yes from the heart, then we are gathered into him. And he arose to die no more. And in him we can live also. And so Jesus Christ answered Job's question with those words. If a man die, shall he live again? He that lives and believes in me, Jesus said, will never die. Do you believe this? Now I want to close with a short reading from Revelation 21. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away. There was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, from Revelation 21. I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them. And they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them, and be their God. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. And he said unto me, It's done. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. He that overcometh shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. But the fearful, and the unbelieving, and the abominable, and murderers, and whoremongers, and sorcerers, and idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death.
Life could only bring again the days I took for granted, when to hear your voice was just a call away. What I'd give for just some time to say the things that slip my mind. There's so much now I'd really like to say, but I could never go back when we did the things we did back then. I'll store those precious memories in my mind. I'll take what you've instilled in me and try to be all I can be, and walk the path that you have left behind. And I sure miss you. Life will never be the same with you not here. Each passing day has brought much pain, but with God's grace my strength remains. I sure miss you, but heaven's sweeter with you there. The little things that seem so small are now like gold in a memory vault. I cherish every one I have of you. Now I can see and recognize the part you played to shape my life. I often see you in the things I do. In God's design and master plan, He saw the hurting hearts of man, as we would say goodbye to those so dear. So with our family and friends, we'll be together once again. We'll view all heaven's splendor hand in hand. And I sure miss you. Life will never be the same with you not here. Each passing day has brought much pain, but with God's grace my strength remains. I sure miss you, but heaven's sweeter with you there. Oh, heaven's sweeter